You're disgusting. The slap landed before I even realized the cup had left my hand. My cheek burned as the backyard went completely silent. Ice cubes scattered across the patio while sweet tea dripped down the front of Vanessa's white designer dress. I'm so sorry, I stammered, instinctively reaching for a napkin. She shoved my hand away. Don't touch me, she shouted so loudly that every conversation around the grill stopped. Look what you did, do you ever think before you act? I didn't mean to, someone bumped into. I don't care what your excuse is. She pointed at the spreading stain like I'd committed some unforgivable crime. You're disgusting, clean my dress and get out. I looked at my older brother hoping, just once, that he'd ask what had happened. Instead, Mark folded his arms and stared at me with disappointment. Either apologize properly, he said flatly, or leave. The words hit harder than the slap. Around us, our relatives looked everywhere except at me. No one spoke. No one questioned how a simple accident had turned into a public humiliation. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I'm sorry, I whispered. Vanessa's expression didn't soften. Not good enough. Just seconds earlier, the cookout had been filled with laughter. Kids were chasing each other across the lawn while burgers sizzled on the grill. My aunt had been telling one of her stories, and my cousins were arguing over who made the best potato salad. Then someone brushed hard against my shoulder from behind as they hurried past carrying a tray of food. The plastic cup flew from my hand. The drink splashed directly onto Vanessa. Everything changed in an instant. I bent down to pick up the cup, but Vanessa stepped back as if I had deliberately attacked her. Don't even come near me, she snapped. I'll pay for the cleaning, I offered quietly. The cleaning, she scoffed. Do you have any idea how expensive this dress is? I opened my mouth to explain again that I hadn't done it on purpose, but she kept talking over me. You always ruin everything. That sentence hurt because it wasn't just about the dress. Vanessa had made comments like that before, small remarks that painted me as careless or awkward whenever the family gathered. Usually I ignored them because arguing only made things worse. Today she wasn't making little comments. She was making sure everyone heard. Mark walked over, wrapped an arm around his wife and glared at me. You've embarrassed Vanessa in front of everyone, he said. The least you can do is stop making excuses. I wasn't making excuses, I replied softly. I was trying to explain. You've explained enough. The finality in his voice told me there was nothing left to say. Nobody defended me. My aunt stared at her plate. My uncle pretended to adjust the grill. Even my cousins avoided looking at me. I grabbed my purse from a patio chair. I'll just go. Good, Vanessa answered immediately. And don't forget you still owe me for this dress. I nodded once, unable to trust my voice. As I walked toward the driveway, I heard conversations slowly begin again behind me, as if nothing unusual had happened. I reached my car, wiped away the tears gathering in my eyes and looked back one last time. That was when I noticed something strange. Vanessa wasn't looking at me anymore. She wasn't even yelling. Instead, she kept staring at the stained part of her dress with an expression that didn't look like anger. It looked like panic. She quickly pressed both hands over the fabric, glancing around as if she didn't want anyone getting too close. For just a second, confusion pushed aside my humiliation. Why did a simple accident make Vanessa look more frightened than furious? The drive home felt longer than it actually was. I kept replaying the sound of the slap, followed by the silence that came after it. Out of everything that happened, that silence stayed with me the most. Not one person had said, it was an accident. Not one. When I pulled into my apartment complex, I sat in my car with both hands still gripping the steering wheel. What is wrong with me? I whispered. The question slipped out before I could stop it. For years, I'd trained myself to ask that question whenever something went wrong. Not because I truly believed it. Because it was easier than believing the people I loved would treat me unfairly. I unlocked my apartment and set my purse on the kitchen counter. My phone buzzed. Mark. For one hopeful second, I thought he'd finally ask if I was okay. Instead, the message read, "You need to reimburse Vanessa for the dress. I'll send you the estimate once we get it." Nothing else. No, are you home safely? No, I'm sorry things got out of hand. Just a bill. I stared at the screen before locking my phone without replying. It wasn't the first time Mark had chosen Vanessa over me. Ever since they married, things had slowly changed. At family dinners, if Vanessa interrupted me, Mark laughed. If she made a joke at my expense, he'd tell me not to be so sensitive. Whenever I tried explaining that her comments bothered me, he'd shrug. That's just her personality. Eventually, I stopped bringing it up. Keeping the peace became my responsibility. If Vanessa was rude, I was expected to ignore it. If she misunderstood something, I was expected to apologize. If she got angry, everyone expected me to calm her down. Somehow, I was always the one responsible for fixing the situation. Today had simply been the worst example yet. Back at the cookout, the atmosphere never fully recovered. People tried returning to their conversations, but the tension lingered. Near the picnic tables, Aunt Linda quietly folded a napkin while watching Vanessa dab at her dress. She leaned toward Uncle Steve. "Did you notice something?" He frowned. "What?" The look on Vanessa's face. "What about it?" Linda lowered her voice. She didn't look angry when the drink hit her. Steve looked confused. "What do you mean?" She looked scared. Before he could answer, Mark walked over. "Can we stop talking about this?" he said firmly. "Cindy made a mistake, it's over." Linda hesitated. "I'm just saying her reaction seemed unusually." "It's over," Mark repeated. The conversation ended immediately. No one argued with him. Across the yard, Vanessa continued blotting the front of her dress, refusing every offer of help. When one cousin offered club soda to remove the stain, Vanessa stepped backward. "No," she said quickly, "don't touch it." The cousin blinked. "I was only trying to help." I said no. The sharpness in her voice surprised everyone nearby. Meanwhile, I unpacked the untouched container of food I'd brought home from the cookout. I looked at it for a moment before placing it straight into the refrigerator. I wasn't hungry anymore. Then I silenced my phone. If the family wanted someone to blame, they could do it without hearing from me. For the first time, instead of trying to repair another broken family moment, I decided to step away from it. Back at the cookout, Aunt Linda watched Vanessa one more time before quietly murmuring to Uncle Steve, "Something about that dress doesn't add up." By the next morning, the story had spread through the family faster than I expected. My phone filled with notifications from relatives. Some asked if I was okay. Others didn't ask anything at all. Instead, they sent messages like, "I heard you ruined Vanessa's dress," or "You should probably make this right." Before I could respond, another notification appeared. Vanessa had posted a vague message on social media. "Some people never take responsibility for the damage they cause. Respect and accountability still matter." She never mentioned my name. She didn't have to. Anyone who had been at the cookout knew exactly who she meant. Relatives began commenting beneath the post. "So sorry that happened. Designer clothes aren't cheap. I hope the person does the right thing." Reading the comments felt like watching strangers decide my character based on a few seconds they had witnessed. I closed the app. A few minutes later, Mark called. I answered after several rings. "Cindy." "Hi. I've talked with Vanessa. I figured. You need to pay for the dress. I already said I'd pay for cleaning." "It isn't about cleaning anymore." I frowned. "What does that mean?" "The dress may be permanently damaged." "I didn't do that on purpose, Mark." "I know it wasn't intentional," he replied, "but accidents still have consequences. And public humiliation doesn't." Silence. Then he sighed. If you refuse to make this right, don't be surprised if it affects future family gatherings. The call ended before I could answer. For the first time, the disagreement wasn't just between Vanessa and me. My place in the family was being questioned. Meanwhile, Mark and Vanessa pulled into their driveway. Vanessa crossed her arms. The repair paperwork should be arriving today, she said. If we need insurance documentation, it'll help. Mark nodded and picked up a package resting beside the front door. It must be this. Inside the house, he sliced open the envelope and pulled out a folder stamped with the name of a high-end clothing restoration company. Vanessa's expression changed instantly. "Give me that," she said, reaching for it. Mark stepped back. "What?" "It's nothing important." He glanced at the first page. His eyes narrowed. The paperwork listed the dress by brand, serial number, and most importantly, the intake date. It was dated nearly a week before the family cookout. Below that was a repair assessment, describing damage to the same section of fabric where the drink had landed. Mark slowly looked up. "This says the dress was already damaged." Vanessa reached across the table, trying to snatch the folder from his hands. "You're reading it out of context." Instead of letting go, Mark opened the folder and turned to the next page. Mark spread the documents across the kitchen table, while Vanessa stood frozen on the other side. The first page was the repair estimate. The second contained close-up photographs taken by the restoration company when they received the dress. He stared at them in disbelief. The damaged section was in exactly the same place where Cindy's drink had spilled. He picked up another page. "The intake date is 6 days before the cookout," he said slowly. "How is that possible?" Vanessa folded her arms. "They must have made a mistake." Mark looked back at the paperwork. A mistake with the date, the photos, and the repair notes. "I don't know, maybe they mixed up dresses." They listed the serial number. Vanessa hesitated for a split second before answering. "Then they mixed up the paperwork." The explanation sounded weaker the moment she said it. Mark had been married to Vanessa long enough to recognize when she was improvising. He walked into the living room without another word. "What are you doing?" Vanessa asked, following him. "My phone backs up everything." He opened his photo gallery and searched for pictures from a charity dinner they had attended a few days before the cookout. Hundreds of images appeared. He stopped on one taken as he and Vanessa entered the venue. She was wearing the same white designer dress. Only now, looking closely, he noticed something he had missed before. A decorative silk wrap had been draped over the exact section of the dress that was supposedly ruined by Cindy's drink. He zoomed in. The edge of the concealed damage was faintly visible beneath the wrap. Mark slowly lowered the phone. At the cookout, Vanessa hadn't wanted anyone near the dress. She had refused every offer to help clean it. She had immediately blamed Cindy before anyone could examine the stain. Every piece suddenly fit together. He looked at Vanessa. "You already knew the dress was damaged." She didn't answer. "You used Cindy's accident to cover for it." Vanessa finally spoke, but her voice lacked the certainty it had carried at the cookout. "I panicked." "You slapped my sister because you panicked." Mark rubbed a hand across his face before reaching for his phone. He called Aunt Linda first. "I need to ask you something about yesterday," he said. Within an hour, several relatives who had questioned Vanessa's reaction had agreed to come by. Meanwhile, miles away, Cindy sat in her apartment believing the family still blamed her. She had no idea that the story was beginning to unravel. A knock echoed through Mark's house. He opened the front door. Aunt Linda stepped inside, holding a small envelope. "I think this belongs in the conversation," she said quietly. Vanessa's face lost what little color it had left. Mark closed the front door behind Aunt Linda and looked at the envelope in her hands. "What is it?" he asked. I picked this up by mistake yesterday when everyone was cleaning up after the cookout, she said. I didn't realize it belonged to Vanessa until I got home. Vanessa's shoulders stiffened. You didn't need to bring that here. Aunt Linda looked between the two of them. I think I did. She handed the envelope to Mark. Inside was a receipt from the same clothing restoration company, whose paperwork was still spread across the kitchen table. Attached to it was a note from the repair specialist. Temporary cosmetic treatment applied. Existing fabric damage remains beneath surface. Avoid moisture until permanent restoration is completed. Mark read the note twice. Then a third time. The room fell silent. He slowly looked at Vanessa. So the repair shop warned you. Vanessa stared at the floor. The drink didn't ruin the dress, Mark continued. It exposed damage that was already there. She finally let out a shaky breath. I caught the dress on a metal display rack while shopping last week, she admitted quietly. It tore. I panicked because I knew how expensive it would be to fix. Mark's expression hardened. And instead of telling me, I thought I could hide it until it was repaired. She wiped at her eyes. When Cindy spilled the drink, I realized everyone would assume she caused the damage. You let them. I wasn't thinking. Mark's voice rose for the first time. You slapped my sister in front of our entire family. Vanessa flinched. You called her disgusting. She said nothing. You threw her out of the cookout. Still nothing. And I stood there and helped you do it. The weight of his own words settled over him. He remembered Cindy's quiet apology. He remembered how she had tried to explain that someone bumped into her. He remembered cutting her off before she could finish. For the first time since the cookout, he saw the entire scene from her perspective. Not as an accident. As a betrayal. That evening, Mark called the family group chat and asked everyone to come by his house or join a video call. When everyone had gathered, he laid the repair paperwork, photographs, receipt and restoration note on the table. He explained everything. No excuses. No missing details. The room filled with stunned silence. Uncle Steve slowly shook his head. So Cindy never ruined the dress. Mark answered quietly. No. Aunt Linda sighed. I knew something didn't feel right. One by one, relatives admitted they had questioned Vanessa's reaction, but stayed silent because they didn't want to create conflict. Instead, they had allowed Cindy to stand alone. Several of them called Cindy that night. She answered the first call cautiously. Cindy, Aunt Linda said, I owe you an apology. For what? For not speaking up when I should have. Another call followed. Then another. Each conversation was different, but they all carried the same message. They had believed what they saw instead of asking what had actually happened. Late that evening, Mark finally gathered the courage to call his sister. She answered after several rings. Hi, Cindy. His voice cracked. I'm sorry. She didn't respond immediately. I should have listened to you. Silence. I humiliated you in front of everyone. Another long pause. I know saying sorry doesn't erase that. No, Cindy replied softly, it doesn't. I was wrong. You were. I believed the easiest story instead of trusting my own sister. Cindy closed her eyes. For years she had imagined hearing those words. Now that they had finally come, they didn't erase the memory of standing alone in that backyard. I appreciate your apology, she said, but trust doesn't come back just because the truth finally showed up. Mark lowered his head. I understand. And I'm not coming back to family gatherings just because everyone believes me now. Cindy. When I needed someone to believe me, no one did. He couldn't argue. Because she was right. Over the following weeks, family relationships changed. No one accepted Vanessa's version of events without question anymore. The effortless influence she had once enjoyed disappeared. Relatives who had automatically sided with her became more cautious, asking questions before reaching conclusions. The expensive repair to the dress became Vanessa and Mark's responsibility. No one asked Cindy for a single dollar. Mark spent months trying to rebuild his relationship with his sister. Sometimes she answered his calls. Sometimes she didn't. He stopped expecting instant forgiveness. Instead, he focused on proving through his actions that he had learned from what happened. Months later, Aunt Linda invited Cindy to a small family dinner. Only a handful of relatives attended. There was no tension, no whispered judgments. No one treated her like the person who had to keep everyone else comfortable. For the first time in years, Cindy laughed without wondering whether someone would turn her into the evening's joke. As she left that night, Aunt Linda hugged her. "I'm glad you came." "So am I," Cindy replied. Walking to her car, Cindy realized something had finally changed. She hadn't become stronger because everyone eventually believed her. She became stronger the moment she stopped accepting blame for something that wasn't hers. The drink stain had disappeared long ago, but the truth had permanently exposed the people who tried to stain her reputation instead.